Good evening, comrades and friends. As communists and revolutionaries and activists, we all know very well that the struggle for liberation, the struggle to end class exploitation has its ups and downs, its victories and its setbacks. In Venezuela, the struggle of the people and its leadership to free themselves from imperialist domination is no exception. Almost 12 years ago, next month, on April the 10th, 2002, the U.S. orchestrated an inexcusable and appalling coup in an attempt to oust President Hugo Chavez from power. It succeeded, but thanks to the intervention of the masses, thanks to the role of the Venezuelan workers, it succeeded for only a few days, creating a moment in history that will be forever gloriously marked in the chronicles of revolution. Since the advent of the Bolivarian Revolution, opened up by the election of President Hugo Chavez in 1998, Venezuela has led the anti-imperialist tide sweeping Latin America and the Caribbean. But let us never forget that this is a tide that was made possible by the Cuban Revolution of 1959, where despite so many efforts, imperialism has never succeeded in overturning socialism on this beloved island, just 90 miles from imperialism. The success of the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela goes hand in hand with the success of the Cuban Revolution. But in 2002, a well-organized and well-funded effort from Washington was carried out in order to stop President Chavez. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were funneled to the right-wing elite in Venezuela. Venezuelan military officers that had been trained right here at the deadly School of the Americas began to work with their U.S. counterparts to remove Chavez from government. The U.S. Embassy in Caracas helped to put what it thought would be the final touches on the coup d'etat. The U.S. met with and directed the rich of Venezuela to carry out acts of sabotage and organize thousands of counter-revolutionaries to take the streets. This right wing had already declared rebellion just a day before and directed protesters dangerously towards the presidential palace, Miraflores. These reactionaries were salivating with the prospect of running the country once again for the capitalist class and turning back all the progress made for the workers. The U.S. spent a huge amount of money stolen from working people in this country to derail the Bolivarian Revolution. It worked day and night to try and remove President Chavez and to put in place a U.S. puppet that would do their bidding. Their aim was, of course, to mainly control the oil of Venezuela and to protect their profits. But this was not Chile, 1973. Venezuela, in April 2002, is a prime example of a long-standing Marxist tenet. And that is that when the workers are in motion, they are the primary agents of change. That the working class, when organized and politically conscious, can wield a power so mighty that the capitalist class cannot stop it. The capitalist class can absolutely be defeated by the workers under those conditions. Cuba is a prime and shining example of that. Washington and their puppets in Venezuela carried out the 2002 coup that captured and jailed President Chavez. But it was the Venezuelan masses who freed him. Once the news broke that Chavez had been captured, the people flooded the streets. They came not just from Caracas, from throughout the country, in cars, buses, and on foot, by the tens of thousands, to take back their president. By April the 14th, Chavez was back in power, a wonderful and powerful accomplishment. The people of Venezuela knew what was at stake. No Chavez meant a return to extreme exploitation and poverty, rampant U.S. control and domination. Now, why do I bring this up now? Well, just like in Cuba, imperialism has not stopped for a moment to overturn the Bolivarian Revolution before 2002 and since. But the April 2002 events are a prime lesson in revolutionary history. The workers of Venezuela tasted power, and it tasted good, just like a sweet mango or a cold margarita in the Texas heat. They wrested their leader from the clutches of the ruling elite, and they struck a blow against their bosses, and they won. Imagine how that felt. Generations of exploitation and hopelessness, generations of having no real ability to control your life, much less your destiny. In April of 2002, however, they tasted the power that the working class can wield. That is a taste that will never go away, and that's a taste that they're going to defend forever. And that's a taste that influences conditions today and helps to strengthen the country right now against the continued imperialist assault. But the struggle, comrades and friends, is difficult despite this victory. We cannot have a romantic view of developments. What is happening right now? Let me preface these next remarks with a call. Venezuela, comrades and friends, compañeros and compañeras, is in danger. They are in danger, much like the people of Ferguson today, who are being subjected to a vicious and violent racist police occupation. The Venezuelan people, like the people of Ferguson, can't catch a break. This Monday, the Obama administration declared the ongoing but escalating aggression against the revolution. The White House announced on March 9th even more sanctions. It stated that the situation in Venezuela was, and I quote, an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States, end of quote. Nothing is said about the 25,000 Hondurans that have been killed since 2009. Nothing is said about the hundreds of thousands of Mexicans that have been killed in the last few years. It's Venezuela that is the national security threat. Obama sent a letter to Congress announcing that the U.S. would be applying to Venezuela the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Washington named 7 Venezuelan politicians to be targets of this act, including subjecting their property in the U.S. liable to seizure. This is an act of terror, and it clearly puts these 7 Venezuelan officials on a hit list. This is completely outrageous and should be condemned. But for us, those 7 Venezuelans are our comrades, and I love them, and will defend them as if there were anyone in this room. You know they are doing something very right, or very revolutionary, that is. Reuters wrote about Monday's announcement. Declaring any country a threat to national security is the first step in starting a U.S. sanctions program. The same process has been followed with countries such as Iran and Syria, U.S. officials said. This is why linking solidarity to the broader anti-war struggle is so important right now and always. President Nicolás Maduro, who was a bus driver, I want to point out with glee, has stated often that the United States has carried out a soft coup against his government. Monday's declaration is further proof that this is so very true. But a U.S. organized coup, soft or not, is extremely dangerous for the people of not only Venezuela, but the world. The U.S. destabilization efforts since 1998 in particular against Venezuela have been non-stop, 24/7 all the time. Destabilization attempts have taken every form within the country, as well from within and from without. The wealthy elite of Venezuela, who are rabid in the face of their loss of privilege and status, who are trembling in their boots just like those on Wall Street at the idea that their profits are in danger, will do nothing to stop the Bolivarian Revolution. They have assassinated Venezuelan revolutionists. They have hoarded food, and they have carried out lockouts and closed factories and stores, all in an attempt to shut down the revolution. But the masses of Venezuela have tasted power and revolution, and they will not be shut down, nor will their leadership. The response by the Venezuelan government has been swift and impressive. It is important to state that we defend all actions and policies that the Maduro administration believes it has to carry out, including refusing to let Kissinger and George Bush into the country, which is wonderful, and ousting U.S. diplomats from Venezuela. That's a bold measure. And this includes the arrest on February 19th of the mayor of Caracas, who the Maduro administration deemed as a danger. The Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Center, I know William called this another fucking liberal. The Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Center issued a condemnation of this arrest and demanded a release of all the political prisoners. But we defend their decisions. We too believe that once you're in cahoots with imperialism, you have lost your right to freedom. There is no freedom for U.S. lackeys, just like there's no freedom of speech for the KKK. Whatever the Maduro administration feels they have to do to defend this revolution, we support unconditionally. In response to U.S. attacks, President Maduro said recently, I call on all the brother governments of Latin America and the Caribbean. I am calling on all our brothers and sisters in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is the moment for solidarity with the Venezuelan people who are being attacked by the government of the United States. No one should stay quiet in the face of this aggression, he said. Well, we are not brother governments of Latin America or the Caribbean. We are in the belly of the beast, anti-imperialists and revolutionaries who know that the number one terrorist, the number one enemy in the world is the U.S. We heed President Maduro's call, and we will not stay quiet in the face of this aggression. In the last few weeks, some of us who do work with the International Action Center have been talking about stepping up our work on Latin America. And developments around Venezuela demonstrate the urgency. We have discussed the need to organize some particular actions around Latin America. One is that we want to propose that on April 8th, the IAC, along with others, make a call for national days of solidarity with the Bolivarian Revolution to demand U.S. imperialism hands off Venezuela. The significance of the day should be clear as April 11th commemorates the failed coup against Chavez. Second is that we also want to pay particular attention to the struggle in Colombia and support the call for a delegation to travel to Havana to participate in observing the peace talks between the Revolutionary Armed Rebels of Colombia, the FARC. In that vein, we have informally met and are working to send 2 comrades to Havana in April. We wish we could send more, but recent developments on U.S.-Cuba relations have made logistics a little difficult and very expensive. In addition, I want to propose that comrades consider traveling to Cuba this summer with the Vencedemos Brigade and decide on that quickly as deadlines are rapidly approaching. And while I am mentioning Cuba and Colombia, let me take a minute. We live in very interesting times. In fact, in some ways, very historical. The U.S. has freed the Cuban Five, which is a huge victory for Cuba. There are attempts to normalize relations, and travel to Cuba has become a real possibility for many North Americans and not just solidarity activists. U.S.-Cuban relations are in an entirely new phase, but only in some ways. Throughout my years of solidarity work with Cuba, I have heard countless times from Cuba's friends how worried they would be if the blockade is lifted and North Americans and the corporations get into Cuba in large numbers. Frankly, I'm not that worried. It should be the U.S. that worries. How many North Americans who have never gone to Cuba and go in here and learn about a free health care? Aren't they going to get some ideas about what to do when they come home? There is no police brutality in Cuba. Many youth are going to go WTF about the U.S. and begin to ask about socialism. I am confident that Cuba will stay strong. As Comrade Raul said, the Cuban Five are exemplary revolutionaries, but they are not the exception. There are many dedicated revolutionaries willing to sacrifice their lives for the revolution, just like the Five did. It is interesting that imperialism has taken a hard cop approach with Venezuela and a soft cop approach with Cuba. But as we all know, a cop is a cop is a cop. No matter the touch, soft or hard, it is dangerous and deadly. Some see the Venezuela-Cuba issue as a bait and switch, an attempt to use the goodwill generated by the move to normalize relations to isolate and destabilize others. Latin American experts are saying that the most dangerous consequence of this action is to put Colombia peace talks between the government and the FARC in jeopardy. Definitely, we must constantly monitor and explore these developments. And we have to wait and see how some of this will all play out. But this much we do know. The Cuban Revolution will never be overturned. We have absolute full confidence in the Cuban leadership as well as the Cuban people to defend the gains of their socialist revolution. 50 years of imperialist aggression never succeeded against the revolution, and neither will this new phase of imperialist policies. We have confidence that the Colombian guerrillas will also never give up, because in 50 years they have never laid down their arms despite all the difficulties. And we have full confidence in the Venezuelan leaders and the masses. But we must be sober about the difficulties. Unlike Cuba, there is still a capitalist class in Venezuela. This bodes danger for the prospects of building socialism in that country. This is exactly why we have to redouble our solidarity efforts. We have to help create the necessary breathing space for the Bolivarian revolutionaries to do what they have to do to build and strengthen their revolution free of imperialist intervention. Organizing resistance and unrest here at home on the domestic issues the way we are doing is also a way to come to the assistance and revolutionaries abroad. We have full confidence that these struggles and all the struggles of the workers and oppressed will go forward in the coming period. Why? Because the objective conditions of capitalist decay spell out more and more decline for the workers. That means more resistance, as the people have no other choice but to fight back. So let us heed the call of President Maduro to not stay quiet. Of course, we're never quiet, but we will renew and intensify our efforts on Latin America. Whether it is in defense of the people of Ferguson, who are right now experiencing further police occupation, or in defense of the families of Eric Garner, Antonio Zambrano Montes, the Latino shot and killed by police in Washington State, or the defense of our own comrades and friends in Boston against union busting and repression, we will continue to work hard to defeat this repression and raise class consciousness in the movement. Above all, we must build our party so that we can bring more and more cadre into the struggle. Only the defeat of U.S. imperialism once and for all will assure that all our struggles are victories. Long live the Bolivarian Revolution of Venezuela. Long live socialism in Cuba. U.S. imperialism out of Venezuela. When I was trying to show why we're confident about the eventual victory, while being sober, because it is very difficult, like Rebecca was saying and others. But it's not based on just wishful thinking or that, some Pollyanna kind of attitude. It's based on real objective conditions, not subjective conditions. And it's based on the fact that, capitalism doesn't offer anything. And the people of Venezuela and Cuba and everywhere know that. There's really not much option. But that doesn't mean that there can't be any further setbacks. And it doesn't mean that, before the revolution it could get even harder. That's sort of my point. But I did want to point out some of the gains that the Bolivarian Revolution has made since Chavez and since, because it's important. since 1999, the number of students in primary schools has increased by more than 7 million pupils. That's amazing. The percentage of students who go on to university has risen. It was 28%, it's now 78%. And there's the Bolivarian Revolution created the first free university system. So, those are some of the, poverty and all of these things have gone down. I admit that I have not been studying, the revolution in Venezuela as much as I should. You kind of depend on Berta and that sort of thing, but we got to rectify that in the party as a whole, and it especially in preparation for what I feel is pretty good sense that we should proceed 11, as an example, March 21st, April 11th, the Unite Conference, and something that Bill said is very true. There has been a vacuum in terms of a strong anti-imperialist working class anti-war movement. In some of my work on Honduras, Venezuela, some very nice liberals who do a lot, make a lot of sacrifices, but they have a very liberal approach to solidarity. And they don't have the approach that more anti-imperialist, more class-conscious people do, and we really need to try to step that up. And with regards to Venezuela, in 2010, there was a group of what I think, I'm going to explore this, and I promise that I will update comments on this. I want to publicly pressure myself on this. But in 2010, there was a group of what I think were, and actually Rebecca might know this, there were a group of intellectuals and left thinkers, at least that's how they were characterized, who wrote a document sort of criticizing the Bolivarian and what was said to be a criticism from the left, because that's okay. You can make observations, you can make suggestions, and one of the things that they said in that was that the Bolivarian Revolution needed to diversify and not be dependent on oil, which, objectively, you stand back, that's true. But can you do that when you're at war? Can you do that when there are coup attempts and attempts to undermine the revolution at every single moment? And so that document, I'm not sure, I really don't know if Workers' Will Party had been asked to sign on to that document. If we were in Venezuela, if we would have signed it, or we would have been critical of that. And it's just one of the things that we have to explore, about the Venezuelan revolution, which is not to say that publicly we would, I haven't seen anything for us to publicly, decry or criticize or anything like that. I mean, I think they truly are doing the best that they can under the most difficult conditions. And really, I want to stress about the importance is for us to build a movement, in order to create that space that they need to go forward. Rebecca pointed out privately to me that she forgot to mention that in Venezuela, they are constantly referring to the Black Lives Matter movement. And this is a wonderful gesture, and it's nothing new. The movement in general in Latin America, I don't know how many conferences or events or people that I've spoken to where they say, oh, the North Americans, well, except the black community. Well, except the black community. They're always like, understand that there's an internal colony, that slavery, is what created this internal colony, and there's always a tremendous amount of solidarity with the black struggle, historically. And that's really, very important to know that our Venezuelan revolutionary comrades are very much paying attention to this movement, and it speaks to the importance of what the party and especially the black comrades are doing with regards to the PPA, because I haven't had a chance to be able to be as helpful as I'd like to, but what's going on there is extremely important and very, it's like a historical kind of thing going on, I think, and we really need to sort of try to see what we can do to boost that up. So I just want to end with, the points that comrades are making about the disabled community and police brutality. It's a surprise that any of us can get out of bed in the morning when you consider what capitalism is doing to us. My own mother, suffered from a lot of depression and had to take antidepressants all the time. And I sometimes think that I've caught that, and how do you even, it takes all your strength, to function under this system. And how in the hell are you supposed to go forth when 2.5 million, mainly Black and Latino youth, have been incarcerated? And forget the incarceration. What about when you get out of prison? You can't find a job. You can't get housing. There is no future. And there's constant messages that your life is worth shit in this system. How the hell are you not supposed to, carry out, in some way or another? And how the police treats so many human beings in so many sectors speaks to the role of what they're supposed to do under capitalism, and that is to oppress and occupy and beat us down. And that's why the movement needs to ratchet up the demand to disarm not only the police, but disband this occupying killer force. There is absolutely no reason why a cop would have to kill someone who's acting out because of their meds or anything else. Under Cuba, under a different kind of system, people would come with love and respect and attention, and the juice, like Tony pointed out, they wouldn't come with guns. They would come with juice, and it can happen. It can happen, and we need to talk about that. We need to talk about that to the masses, to raise that as a real demand in this period. We have to do that. Thank you.